Do you have a friend that likes to bet on just about anything? Well, if you do, you may want to point them to Voxie Tactics, a Web3 tactical turn based game developed by AlwaysGeeky Games, because it's trying to combine risk to earn with one of gaming's oldest genres. That's a tall order when you're running up against classic franchises like Final Fantasy Tactics, Heroes of Might and Magic, Civilization, Front Mission, XCOM, and I could go on and on naming banger after banger that has helped propped up this niche. On paper, a Web3 tactical RPG isn't a bad pitch, as long as the game loop is solid enough. You could prop up an in game economy with a crypto token and add an ownership layer for items and units. That might add some added value for players to trade and customize their teams. The problem is that Voxie Tactics doesn't really deliver on either the gameplay or the Web3 side. I decided to try it because other creators on crypto Twitter were pushing it, but what I found was a bare bones turn based tactics game with absolutely poor onboarding and a bootstrapped risk to earn layer. The problem started as soon as I opened the game. I was immediately asked to choose 3 characters blindly. There was an okay mix of classes and races, but realistically, I had no idea what I was doing because I hadn't even played the game yet. I couldn't proceed without completing this step, however, so I chose a team assuming I could change it later. Turns out, I couldn't. And I chose a really bad combination of classes that would end up following me through my whole experience with the game. I decided to try the PvE mode first, and it immediately didn't feel good. There are only 4 missions to work through. They're all tied together by a really generic narrative with cutscenes that are probably AI generated. You play as a hero named Zero, who's the head of a brigade. You get ambushed while on patrol, and eventually you run into some raccoon character who betrays you in one mission, only to ask for your help to rescue his brother in the next. For some reason, you just go along with that. The gameplay itself is about as basic as you can get for this type of game. You position your characters on a grid, you take turns moving them around the map, and you use your abilities to attack enemy units. Each character has 4 abilities and an ultimate that are all based on their class. There's an okay mix of them, and they do seem to fit the classes well. The problem was that there was no onboarding whatsoever, so I had no idea what all the different symbols meant or how the stats worked. The ability descriptions were hilariously unclear, and most didn't explain at all what the effects were. I had to figure out what to do through trial and error. That wasn't so bad in PvE, but it made things really unenjoyable in PvP, where each turn only had a 45-second timer. The more I played, the more I realized I was doing this for nothing because I wasn't getting any rewards or XP for beating these missions. I didn't see any kind of progression like leveling or class upgrades. I also didn't acquire any items, gears, or currency from beating enemies. So, not only did I miss out on improving my favorite units, I also wasn't able to experiment with different class combinations because my unit choices were locked in. Since I wasn't having fun with the PvE mode, I decided to check out the 3 PvP modes instead, but I basically had a similarly bad experience. As a free-to-play player, I could only play the basic arena mode, which, according to the description, was for new players to fight against new players. When I jumped in, I discovered that I was sadly limited to the same 3 characters I was stuck with in PvE. The gameplay was exactly the same, only in a 3v3 format, so there was nothing special to it. Of course, though, I got demolished since my formation had some very severe issues like low damage output and a complete lack of healing. The worst part of it was that there was nothing I could do about it. The only way to change my formation was to delete my account, start over, and pick better classes the next time. I ran into another severe issue though. The delete account button didn't seem to work for me in the game for some reason. That meant the only way to re-roll my account was to create a new immutable wallet using a different email. Not only is that a huge pain in the ass, but it also impacts how players collect rewards by completing quests on immutable play. At this point, there were only 2 multiplayer modes left to save my experience with the game, but both of them required me to buy crypto or NFTs. The first, Titan Arena, is a new mode they added that allows players to use a new set of characters exclusive to that mode. In principle, Everyone is on an even footing because all of these Voxies have the same stats and no gear. To play, though, you have to wager Voxite, a premium currency you purchase outside of the game on the Voxie Tactics website. The second PvP mode, Extreme Arena, is reserved for Voxie NFT owners. I didn't own any Voxies, but I did have the option to rent some on the website as well. Either way, I had to log out of the game, create a separate account on the game's website, connect my Ronin wallet, send Polygon tokens to the account, trade them for voxel tokens, figure out the rental system, then figure out how to purchase Voxite. An hour later, I felt like giving up because I just didn't see how all of this work would be worth it. I pushed through anyways though, and I put up the minimum bet for Titan Arena of 100 Voxite. To my surprise, it only took me a few minutes to find a match. Also to my surprise, my selection of units was once again based on my original class choice from earlier. This time, I was stuck with a samurai, a time mage, and a monk. Not exactly a good DPS build. Naturally, I lost all of my matches and all of my Voxite against players who clearly knew the beat and had better team comps than me. Disappointed, I moved over to Extreme Arena to try out the assets I rented, but I couldn't find a match. A closer look at the leaderboard showed me that there were only 29 participants who even played this mode, and a lot of them had 0 wins and 0 losses like me. That's just my starting point with Voxie Tactics, right? It's layers of frustration on top of a poorly designed tactics game that largely feels like a waste of time. To make things worse, Voxie Tactics is in a genre that I know extremely well based on decades of playing all the classics. I immediately knew this game was subpar as soon as I started playing because there's nothing that stands out about it. I think AlwaysGeeky Games wanted to make it stand out with voxel art, but that was a miss on 2 counts. First off, voxel design is definitely not a rarity in Web3. A lot of these games use them in an attempt to recreate Minecraft with NFTs. Plus, Voxie Tactics' attempt isn't exactly peak. The models look average, and most of the maps reuse the same assets. Second of all, the reason to use voxels in the first place is to create a world that players can interact with. There's none of that here, and it's a missed opportunity. The game could be so much better if certain abilities could change the terrain, or if you could build structures, or if abilities could blow up some of the scenery. That would truly help the game stand out. But if the gameplay is flat and the presentation falls short, what exactly makes Voxie Tactics stand out? Well, it's certainly not the Web3 integration, because that isn't really usable in the game. The only thing left is the risk-to-earn model AlwaysGeeky introduced with Titan Arena. And if a game's best feature involves gambling on PvP matches, then it's really in trouble. First and foremost, because it chases away a lot of people. Betting on 3v3 turn-based tactics matches really amounts to a niche form of prop betting. And although there is an audience for it in Web3, it's not really a mainstream thing. Yet, that's clearly where the game wants the action to be. But that's also where the value proposition gets shakier. That's because Titan Arena comes with some serious fairness issues. The fact that you can't select your characters in advance unless you go through this convoluted process of rerolling your account is a major barrier. Unless someone tells you what to pick on account creation, and let's be honest, why would they when they're competing against you? You're likely to spend a lot of time rerolling your account while you learn this new set of units. You're also likely to get destroyed by those other players who have already figured this out. The consumables you buy in the shop also create a big pay-to-win issue. Voxies can use a potion and act in the same turn, so anyone can just buy a lot of health potions and keep their units at max HP pretty much throughout the fight. It doesn't necessarily make economic sense for small-time wagers, but if you're playing for the max bet of $150, it's probably a good idea to come into that match with a big supply of potions. Overall, it's a bad risk-to-earn design that takes away all the fun these competitive modes can bring, and it hardly seems worth the time or money. Frankly, neither does NFT ownership, because what's the point of owning NFT gear and characters that you can't use because no one else sees the value of playing with them either. Surprisingly, there are leaderboard rewards tied to Extreme Arena, so that's something, but the price of Voxel is less than 1/100th of a cent at the time I'm recording this video, so leaderboard rewards and rental fees hardly seem worth it at this point. The flip side is that assets are incredibly cheap to buy and rent, if you can find them, that is. When I tried renting mine, all I could find were hundreds of units from the same Robo class, and I'm not really sure why. Those other classes sure as hell aren't being used in the game, so maybe people just stop bothering listing them on the marketplace, just like they did playing the game. So where do I stand on Voxie Tactics? Well, if you're looking for a tactical turn-based game to enjoy, this is definitely not it. The gameplay experience is paper thin and doesn't hold up to most other tactics games out there. If you're looking for a good risk-to-earn experience, on the other hand, also no. The convoluted format and pay-to-win structure seems to overwhelmingly favor experienced players, and there are just flat-out better risk-to-earn games out there if you're a serious player willing to spend. That's why I can only rate Voxie Tactics a 1.5 out of 5. Technically, it is a playable game, but the sum of its parts leads to a frustrating experience that doesn't have anything unique to offer. That wraps up my review of Voxie Tactics. I hope you enjoyed this video and got something from it. If you did, please consider liking it and subscribing to my channel for more Web3 reviews like this one. Thank you so much in advance for your support, and I'll see you next time.